Hello, everyone. It's Patty, and I am going to chat with you all today a little bit about kind of what we're going through currently and the true history of humanity. So, I've always been interested. Well, let me put it this way first. As a child, my least favorite studies were the history that came in my history books in grade school and high school because for whatever reason, I just was really disgusted by the history that they were presenting to me. I thought it was just like the same old story, some dictator wants to control a ton of the planet and they invade. And you see that repeated over and over and over again. And I found it quite boring. So, as a child, I always found the natural sciences to be a little bit more interesting. And, being that I live in nature on this planet, I have a human body, those were the things, that were most pertinent to me, not some fake history. That is why I pursued the biological sciences. And, all of this information that I'm about to share with you, a lot of it I got from Michael Tessarian. He is a really cool, it's 11 hours of just video footage. But if you want to watch the whole thing, I recommend it, or maybe take it in chunks. But he has a nice long presentation on Atlantis, and that's where a lot of this information is going to be connected to. Mark Passio has also done a wonderful presentation called Cosmic Abandonment, where he touches upon a lot of the same topics. So, why is this information important pertaining to what we're going through today? Well, over the past couple of months, I've been really kind of contemplating this. And in our true history, again, that which is presented by researchers like Michael Tessarian and Mark Passio, there used to be on this planet a Michael Tessarian calls it kind of like a great continent in the region of the Atlantic Ocean called Appalachia. And a region in Appalachia called Atlantis is kind of where this story begins. So, a lot of what I'm sharing with you might sound a little crazy. So, just take it with a grain of salt. If this is the first time you're hearing any of this, be open to it because, what you're being told in the programmed indoctrination camps, that is our modern day educational system, is meant to keep you subdued. It's meant to keep you enslaved. The powers that should not be, they do not want humanity to be aware of their powers because they've been through this all before. The powers that should not be have encountered a slave race that they created that ended up, not following the agenda that they created them for. So who are humans? What are we? Are we descended from, the great apes, as we're told? I'm a biologist in many of my classes on evolutionary biology. I'm told that we have a common ancestor to the great apes. And it's possible, but honestly, I don't think it's probable. I don't think we're related to the great apes. As much as I love animals and I respect their miraculous life forms, I don't think humanity, the version of humanity that exists today, are descendants of that. I think we have been the result of a genetic manipulation. And there was kind of a great sin that was, worked upon by these, and we're just going to call them aliens because they came from a different planet or a different star system or even a different galaxy. I don't know. That I can't give you details about. But these aliens, if you will, to give you a little bit of a backstory, they were fleeing and being chased, and they needed to hide out somewhere. And if you look at the position of the Earth, we're kind of on the rim of our galaxy, kind of on the outskirts, in a solar system that, isn't in the thick of things. We're not in the middle of the galaxy. We're kind of, on the outlying areas. And here, this alien race fleeing destruction and looking for a place to kind of settle for a bit, they landed upon possibly Earth, but possibly Tiamat. Tiamat, which I'll explain in just a second, is a planet that has been destroyed. It is a planet that used to exist between Earth and Mars. And this planet was destroyed. And I don't know, if it's clear in the historical findings by the true researchers, again, Michael Tessarion, Graham Hancock, these types of individuals that have done like archaeological digs to find evidence of what I'm sharing with you. But Tiamat was destroyed as the people chasing these aliens who landed on Earth or possibly on Tiamat, maybe they mistaken Tiamat for Earth, but they completely destroyed it. And that created, some major disruptive events on our planet that ended up causing a lot of the problems that, changed the course of history. But let me backtrack a little bit. So again, this alien race lands on Earth. They see the beautiful diversity on our planet, which, animals living in harmony with nature, by the way. The natural animal population, the plant population, all of the beautiful living beings on our planet, they're living in harmony. And in fact, when they landed on our planet was situated so that the land masses and how they rotated and received sunlight and experienced, various climates, it was like almost as if all of the land masses were in a perpetual, beautiful spring that allowed for the natural growth of flora to feed all of the animals and whatever beings were on this planet. So, think about, fruit trees and other plants that we would subside upon, that we would use to nourish our bodies. And part of with the events that occurred, the planet ended up kind of getting knocked off its alignment and shifted. So now we have, parts of the land masses experiencing seasons like winter, and while on the other side of the hemisphere have a summer, and then vice versa. So that was a big change. But before I digress too much, the aliens that landed on the planet, they needed help. There are a couple of different theories. I know Mark Passio talks about, them mining for precious metals like gold. And Mark Passio gets into what is the true intrinsic value of gold. He doesn't completely, I think, lay it all out because, there are some alternative theories there. But is gold used internally and medicinally? Is that why it's such an important metal? Maybe for these alien beings, it was important for their physiology. Or it could be that gold, as we know in certain technological things, it's used in various processors. I don't know technology very well as far as how computers are made, but I think gold is part of that technology. So, Mark Passio talks a little bit about these slaves. They needed workers to mine for gold. Michael Tessarion talks a little bit about how they needed a slave race to basically grow food so that they could live, right? And so either way, these aliens created slaves, long story short. And the first slave race that they created, because what they had to do is genetically manipulate beings that were already on the planet living in harmony with nature. But they had to make these beings a little bit more programmable, if you will, a little bit more. And I think this first version, by the way, of what they created was not what they were expecting. But they needed to create beings that could take directions, like whether they're mining for gold or they're growing food or even building infrastructure like pyramids and whatnot. Whatever they're doing, they needed to follow directions. And the beings that were on the planet, because they don't know how to follow directions, because all they know is how to interact with nature and its grandeur. And, maybe these early human beings were very connected to nature, and they just took off, they were able to communicate with the plants and just be able to know certain things, perhaps. But anyway, they were genetically manipulated, and they created a slave race. Now, the powers that should not be, and by the way, a lot of this information can be found in the Bible. So, the aliens wanted to create a slave race to allow them to do work for them. And they had to manipulate genes, the DNA, in the cells of these beings to give them certain abilities that would allow them to take direction more easily from these aliens. And like I said, a lot of this is talked about or written about in the Bible. The Bible, I heard Michael Tessarian describe it as kind of, the Bible is basically the Old Testament of the Bible anyway, is the history of Atlantis, which is what we're going to be getting into. That area in a continent called Appalachia that has since sunk to or has been, I guess, covered with ocean water in the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. And after the aliens made this slave race, and these slaves were called the son of man, I think, or the son of God, I can't remember. They're the son of the beings that created them. Son being, their creation. But it turned out that these beings started to become aware that they were being taken advantage of. And they were like, screw this. They had awareness almost equal to the aliens that created them, because by inserting various genes into their DNA, and we're going to talk about this insertion of genetic information into their DNA and causing a change in their phenotypic or expressive behavior. By inserting these genes, they had kind of some of the same abilities of the aliens. And some of this is clairvoyance, some of this are healing capacities. And they were like, we don't need to live here in Atlantis and be ruled by these assholes. We're going to kind of take off. And that first race of the created beings of the aliens, they took off to another continent. And I don't know if the continent was called Lemuria or something else, but they took off to Lemuria. Now here's something very interesting that Michael Tessarian talks about. These beings were called the serpent race. The serpent race. And it wasn't because they were created from reptiles. It was because that's what the genetics, it's kind of connected to, they were created by inserting genes into our DNA double helix. And if you look at the DNA double helix, and you look at that symbology, there is a serpent around a rod, right? That's what the DNA double helix is. It's a twisted ladder. Two complementary strands of nucleotides that twist about each other. That's what our DNA looks like. Watson and Crick, identified that conformational shape of DNA. So that's where serpent comes from. And Michael Tessarian does a bit refute David Icke, which I think David Icke is wonderful. David Icke saying that he, would see reptiles, and perhaps, there are people that have certain different characteristics that are reptile-like, but the serpent in the Bible is more connected to the DNA molecule as opposed to a reptile. So anyway, the first created race, the sons of the gods or the sons of man, they're like, screw this, we're leaving Atlantis. They take off to Lemuria. And after they take off to Lemuria, the aliens that are still there, they're like, well, let's try this again. And they create a second race. And they had to make sure that they were not as conscious as their first, version, 1.0. The creation called 2.0, they wanted to dumb down a little bit so that they were not going to wise up to the gig, realize that they're slaves and take off. Because they needed these slaves to work for them. Well, meanwhile, back in Lemuria, version 1.0 is like, hey, you guys, these people that they're creating version 2.0 are still connected to us. We still have human DNA. We have human DNA mixed with the alien DNA, and now they're creating a new version with the same human DNA. So that genetically, they're still related to us. And the Lemurians wanted to go back to Atlantis and save this new creation. And say, hey, don't fall for, their control over you. So here's what's interesting, and this connects to the Genesis book in the Bible. So many of you know the story of Genesis. Adam and Eve are in paradise. They're naked, and Michael Tessarion talks about what the word naked really means. They're unaware. So anyway, Michael Tessarion talks about how Adam and Eve are naked and in the Garden of Eden. And being naked is a euphemism for being unaware of who they really are. So, where was I? Adam and Eve are naked in the Garden of Eden, meaning that they're unaware of, who they are. And you know the story that God, Yahweh, Jehovah, both of which I think are alien, the aliens that created Adam and Eve, right? They're the creators. They told Adam and Eve, hey, do not eat from this tree, right? You guys know the story if you've ever been introduced to Genesis in the Bible. And guess what? A serpent shows up when God, walks away. A serpent shows up and say, hey, guys, listen. Go ahead and eat from that tree because you're going to become aware of who you are if you do so. The tree of knowledge, a fruit tree, which I find to be incredibly interesting because as a naturopath that recommends a fruit-based diet for clients trying to reverse chronic disease, I find fruit to be the most healing. Not meat, not the carnivore diet, which you do that long term, that's going to be really hard on your kidneys and you're going to end up on dialysis. I digress a little bit, but fruit, that which does not harm any living being, it's a gift from the plant. So the serpent shows up and says, hey, go ahead and eat from the tree of knowledge. Whoever this God character is, they're not going to curse you because you're going to become aware of what the hell's going on. And so Adam's like, I don't know, let's follow the rules. Let's go ahead and, do what God says. And then Eve's like, I don't know, the serpent might have a good point. And Eve, as we all know, took that first bite from the apple. And who is the serpent? Like I said, the serpent were the race 1.0, the Lemurian race that had fled Atlantis and came back to try to save version 2.0. And when the serpent, was trying to coerce. The serpent, which is often conflated with the devil, was trying to help humanity, not trying to destroy us. And see how everything in our history is inverted? Up is down, left is right, good is bad, so on and so forth. You can't really trust anything in our history. I mean, I think the Bible is true history, but how it's been annotated, how it's been expressed, I mean, obviously we all know that certain empires have created different versions of the Bible and omitted very important information that points to flying saucers in the sky. There have even been paintings showing these UFO crafts in the sky. So there's a lot of things that have been omitted or inverted in even the Bible, our current version of it anyway. And so yeah, that's where a lot of this comes from, right? But anyway, Eve bites the apple, and then I guess, I don't know, as the story goes, they're now ridden with sin. And this was the whole reason Jesus needed to come. And you guys all know that I'm a big fan of Jesus. I think Jesus was a legit guy. Let's talk a little bit about Jesus for a second. And many of the ascended masters that were born of a virgin. Let's talk about what that really means. Born of a virgin. This means that they were begotten of a virgin. So there was no sexual intercourse in the creation of the zygote that led to Jesus, or even others that, again, historically, if you read various documents, were born of a virgin. Jesus wasn't the only one, right? And what this means, born of a virgin or begotten, is that, again, an alien was involved in producing Jesus. And the alien, maybe as an angel, maybe these aliens presented themselves in a etheric form, not a physical form. This angel presented his or herself to Mary and said, hey, you're going to be barren with a child. And Mary, as the story goes, was a virgin, had never had sexual intercourse. And next thing you know, she's pregnant, right? And then she gives birth to Jesus. And I'm not saying all of the aliens that visited this planet were nefarious. I think that maybe Jesus, in his incarnation, was here to deliver a message, kind of like the Lemurians from, that were trying to save Adam and Eve. Because what does Jesus tell us? You can do what I do, and even greater things. This is an important message to humans. Jesus performed miracles. Jesus he knew, he was clairvoyant. He had powers beyond our understanding. And, many people were quite impressed with him, changing water into wine and creating, food from nothing. I mean, there's many stories in the Bible. I personally think Jesus, during his, before he, reached his early 30s, late 20s, when he started actually sharing this message, I think his time in becoming who he was spending time with a group of humans on the planet, or perhaps, hybrids on the planet. I don't think we have a true human race anymore. But a group called the Essenes. And the Essenes, taught him a lot about nature. These were groups of beings that were connected to that original human before the genetic manipulation that was in tune with the earth, with the cycles of the earth, in tune with the plants. This is where we get a lot of our understanding of the herbs. Like this plant heals this situation or helps with the body to detoxify this ailment in the body. And how everything in nature heals us. Everything in nature heals us. That was the true message. And Jesus grew up in that environment, and he came to deliver that message to humanity. And that's what begotten means. So when you see begotten in the Bible or other older works, that means it came from a created, like an alien, messing with the genetics of something and implanting this into a woman. Okay? So I don't want to go on. I mean, if you're interested in any of this, watch Cosmic Abandonment by Mark Passio or Atlantis, any of the Atlantis videos. You can find them all on Odyssey, which I recommend you go on Odyssey to find this, because first and foremost, Odyssey doesn't have stupid ass commercials that interrupt your watching pleasure. But also, and you can earn some crypto, I think, in Odyssey. YouTube, though, they're part of the system that is limiting information, true information. There is some good stuff on YouTube that makes it through. Their algorithm doesn't knock off everything. But I would go to Odyssey to find those two works. And I'll put links of them both in the information below this video, because this will be on Odyssey. I might have a portion of it on YouTube just to kind of guide people to the full information in this video. But around here, around the 30-minute mark, I'm going to be connecting this to what's going on today.